to go. Yeah.
I did this because this was just a little to show where we're going. Okay, so that one's finished. That needs a little bit more darks. That one's not quite done, and the hippos need some more work. But we haven't got anything on ours, so it's a nice, easy place to start. So I'll just shoot that over there. Right, the only thing I have got is I have drawn some sort of wavy lines. So I sort of want a little bit of movement in the water. He's not at sea. It looks like he's at sea there, but he's not. Hippos don't live in the sea. They live in muddy pools and rivers. And
they went muddy before they went in, they're muddy
when they come out. Very often, the hippos, so they are gregarious, they live in groups generally. They will stay in the pool as it dries up. And only when there's no water left in the pool will they then move to the next pool. And obviously I don't know how they know where the next pool is, but they do. I'm not talking about if they're in a river, okay? I'm talking about, I have decided to do a horizon because I didn't want to deal with all the water. I just didn't like it. So I have created a little horizon, and I have only put in my defined water on the bottom part of my hippo. So if you have a look, I've got no lines. That's water, but I haven't got any of my curly-whirly lines in the back because it's water, it's nothing. It's just too far away to see anything. Okay.
So it doesn't matter if we've got hardly any colours on it at the moment.
That's what we want to start with.
Yeah, because you know you've got proper colours there, haven't you? But mine are all.
That was my background.
All right.
Okay.
My background's come out as nothing now.
So those are my initial colours, my background. If you haven't got any colours, you'll see how you can create.
Right.
Okay. So we need to keep with the same colours. So I've used Prussian, raw sienna and alizarin. So I'm keeping with those. And the first thing we need to do is, right, I've got those. Oh, if you haven't got any masking fluid on, and I could probably have put a bit more on, but anyway, I have put some lines also in that sort of circular motion of masking fluid. And I've also got some bubbles. So I've got some half or semi-circular shapes that represent bubbles. Okay. Okay, so how are we going to start? We're going to start off just getting the background, not that, it's just the water in. So Prussian wet this all. Apologies if anybody gets wet. Okay. I've been using cerulean all morning, so like, ooh. Okay, Prussian, raw sienna, and I want a mucky, and alizarin. Right, I'm using my square brush, and I'm literally painting from my horizon down. Okay, and then I'm just going to go up and soften that because I need to buy myself some time. And then I'm going to make a slightly stronger colour, and again, I'm seeing this as a river. It's not a mud pool, and that should still be wet. And I'm just dropping, I'm not painting strokes. I did 2 strokes, But the rest of them I just dropped with the square brush. And I did a drop, a stroke, drop, drop, and a stroke. Okay, and I'm going to just leave all that to settle. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So, oops, I need to just remix that. The reason I didn't do it at the same time is because I didn't want that to dry off. So if I had gone and done this with the first layer, it all would have been too dry. So I haven't started on wet paper. I am, hang on. Can I just have the masking tape, please? Thanks. I'll put that there. And it's a slightly different colour, doesn't matter. Notice that I'm actually going over the hippo a little bit, but it's so pale that you can't actually see where I've gone over. Right, and I'm painting up into it. So what I'm really doing is dampening that section so that this colour bleeds down into the damp so that I don't get a hard edge. Right, so I don't want to finish that. I'm sort of happy with that for now. I'm happy. Do I want to turn it upside down? I think I can.
Do you know,
Turn it
I just
upside
wish
down.
I could one day just say I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I would be if I was you.
Can I just see it stood up? Yeah. Okay. So I can see you've got an actual hard edge there.
Yeah,
That
but
doesn't matter.
that doesn't matter. It's going to be covered up later.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do now is get some foliage in here. Now, you can take 6 hours to do this foliage, or you can get it done quite quickly. I'm going to do it quite quickly for class, but I'll probably go back and fiddle. So I've got my salt handy. I've got my colours. I'm going to just start off. And one thing I don't want to do is touch my water, okay? So I'm leaving a little dry edge. And I don't want to take my foliage all the way up. So I'm going to turn that back that way. The reason I've turned it back is because there was obviously a bit of water coming in there. And I'm not going to go over his ear, but I am going to bring that foliage down, maybe. Okay, so I'm only going to show you one side because it does take a bit of time. So I've still got my raw sienna, or whatever colours you're using, and my Prussian. And I've got a bit of alizarin in there, and I've sort of got all those colours mixed. Whoops, I did touch my water. Don't really want to touch my water. And because if you look at my plate, I've got lots of colours on my plate. When I use my square brush, the colours all come out because I haven't mixed it like a cement mix. Now, I don't want that there, don't like it. Ooh, I'm going to have to leave it. Okay. So it is wet up to there, but I'm not actually going to paint it wet all the way. Just paint it to there. Happy. Got a bit of a hard line. Happy. I'm not going to fiddle. In fact, the hard lines will work for me. And I'm going to turn it back upside down. Still got my Prussian. So what I'm doing is I'm actually waiting for some of this to settle down, because as it settles down, those colours or that paper is more able to receive paint. If I had to carry on and just do it while it was all equally wet, all those colours would end up just a blur. So just got some of those hard edges, and I'm just using, that's quite dry, just the corner of that brush, and I'm just tickling. Right, so every time my brush goes into my palette, I'm actually picking up slightly stronger paint. So my paint, this blob, I've got this is wet, so if I needed that to be wetter, I would just take some of that. I wouldn't go into my water. So, and now I've gone and made it all weak again, but that's good because it's buying me time. This is where you sit and you talk to your neighbour, or you go and make coffee and then you come back and it's too late.
I have to talk to you.
If you want to. Right, I don't really want it on the red side, and I'm going to, still starting at the same place, and I'm putting another layer over. Same place, some long short, some long stroke, some short. So that is basically the process. Okay, it will dry lighter. I want to get rid of that, it's annoying me. Okay, now I am going to put a little bit of salt in there. So my salt, I can decide how much comes out. If you can't, put it in the palm of your hand. In fact, I'm going to do that anyway, because I only want a smattering of salt, and I only want it at the horizon, so where the bush comes. I don't want it all over, so I'm being quite careful, and I don't want too much there. Okay, get rid of that. Then I'm going to look at that again. Now you can say, well, this is very long-winded, but that's what it is. If there's anything that you want to change, I don't mind those for now. I can break that up by putting in a spot of water. But I'm being careful where I put that water. So I'm creating cauliflowers. Okay? And it's a controlled amount of water.
Yeah.
Okay? And then I'm going to go back to this. So my paint is getting slightly thicker, slightly stronger. Put a bit more of my, and I'm just going to play. Just play. I'm reintroducing paint where my salt is. Notice that I'm not going up here. I'm
Does it
playing.
matter whether the salt is dried or
No, the salt is actually working. So if you put too much, if this is too wet, if that is too wet and you put it into here, you get a great big cauliflower, and also you'll dissolve the salt. So I'm sort of hanging back a bit until this has had time to settle in. Okay, so half the problem with watercolour is that we do not have the patience to let the paint play. And really I need to say, okay, if I make that too involved, I'm going to be drawing my eye away from my hippo. So I just want it to be airy, fairy nothingness. I was going to drop in some raw sienna, but I'm not going to. Right, so, and I'm not going to, at this point, make it any darker. But that is still wet. I don't want to dry that. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a break. and I want you to go and do your background. I was going to have to balance out my water where it touched my land. So I've just got real muck on my tile, and I'm literally just putting some of that muck in. But I don't want it to come all the way down, because if I bring that muck all the way down, I'm going to lose my light, and I still want the light and the dark. So I'm just, and then if you notice, I've also cleaned up my tile. So between doing the background and doing this next section. So I will concentrate now also on what Jane said about mixing on the tile. So I've got a clean tile. Okay, so painting the water. Basically, the swirls and that are going to be a repetition of the colours that are in the hippo, and the colours that are in the hippo are the colours that's in the rest of the painting. So I'm not changing my colours because I'm painting water. I'm changing the way in which I mix them. So instead of mixing Prussian and alizarin to get a purple, I'm mixing Prussian and raw sienna to get a green. Okay, but the colours are the same. Right, so 2 ways of doing this. I've got these marks on my paper, and we're going to paint some as positive shapes and some as negative shapes. So I'm going to do the negative first. So by negative, we mean that we paint around the shapes. So bit of clean paint on my towel. Slurp of coffee. There's my raw sienna. Now, I don't put my raw sienna into my blue. It's separate. Now I blend it a bit. So what I've got is blue, green and yellow. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to keep it clean and I want to keep it light. And I said I was painting negatively. So I'm going to paint negatively around some of these shapes. So I'm not painting the shapes, I'm painting around the shapes. So in so doing, I'm going to be painting some of the water. Okay, and I'm going to soften those edges. And I'm using a round brush on on dry paper. So now that I've got that shape going, I'm going to concentrate on building up the colour. Now, it doesn't really matter whether I concentrate on the top edge or the bottom edge, as long as I am consistent. So if I put my wet paint on that bottom edge, when I come down here, I don't then want to put it on the top edge of the damp shape. I want to be consistent. And I'm literally putting my brush I'm holding my breath. Whew, breathe. I'm putting my brush onto dry paper, but the point is touching the wet shape. So because of that, I've got a hard edge or a hardish edge down here, and the paint is bleeding upwards. So it's I've got little fingers. Okay. So I'm controlling all the time my liquid in my brush, and I've lost my nice clean raw sienna, so I've put a bit more on because I sort of want to keep it muddy-ish for now. There I'm painting around that shape. So I'm leaving a little gap there because leaving that gap controls where the watercolour flows. And when I come down to here, I'm actually painting up to and over his face. Bottom. So I am not painting all the paper. I can still see some of the original colour coming through. Alizarin. So if you look at my tile, I've got blue, yellow, and some sort of a mix in the middle. A bit more yellow. I've now got a browny colour, blue, green, and a little bit of, can you see what I'm doing, Jane?
Yeah.
It's okay. And I'm going back with that browny colour, and I'm looking for that wet edge, I'm looking for the damp edge, and I'm just dropping it in. Now, if my tile, that might not, oh, it's still wet enough. If my tile is not wet enough, so in other words, if I do not have enough wet paint on my tile, I will not be able to pick up colour, and my brush will then be too dry to paint the colour onto the wetness that is waiting to receive it. Does that make sense? So it's how wet is this? How wet is the shape that we're going to paint? Right. The whole time I'm thinking lights and darks, hard and soft. I'm going to leave that side for now because I think it's sort of, having said that, if I think that this tile is losing its wetness, I get a little bit more water from my pot. It should be the clean water, but I don't drown my brush. I literally just put the tip of my brush in so that I can control the flow of that. If I put too much in and it's too watery, I immediately make it stronger. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just put a little bit more of that Prussian in there because
And
that's
that's
what
a
I
stronger
want.
mix than you had.
It's
earlier.
slightly stronger. Okay. Right, so I'm going to leave that to dry off, and I'm going to come over to this side, which is more or less what I've done here, except I painted these shapes positively. So I painted some of those shapes, and I'm now going to paint around them.
So why have you painted positively as opposed to the other side?
Because you need both
Oh, do you?
within the same thing.
Okay.
And I wanted that to dry off so that that's drying, so I could paint that while that's
Okay.
drying. So that's a negative. Here's a positive one. So I'm going to paint, because it's a mix really, but the biggest thing is to keep your lights and darks.
So are you saying that in most pictures you do need a bit of positive and a bit of
Yeah.
negative painting to sort of make
Yeah.
it interesting?
That's what it's all about. It's making, it's the interest.
Yeah.
So you do not want a painting that's only got one or two techniques, because it's not going to be very interesting, is it? Okay. Now, I think that side's actually better, but anyway. So there's I've still got some colours. I've got my raw sienna, my blue, my purple, my yellow, my red, and into that I'm going to start. The other thing I'm looking at is where my masking fluid is. So now that I'm starting to get some shapes going, I'm looking to see where my masking fluid is. And I'm painting directly underneath my masking fluid. So there's a little stripe of masking fluid. And even if I haven't got a circular bit in there, I can put it in if I want to. There's some masking fluid. Now that is too hard an edge, so I'll just soften that bottom edge. I'm going to have to take some of that masking fluid off in a minute so that you can see the effect. It's all about the lights and the darks. And make that, so I'm painting positively again into that shape and positively, and I'm painting positively into there, and I'm painting positively into there. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make that hippo stand out. You see how he's starting to develop. If I think, oh, I put too much paint in there, don't worry. Just either put some water, or I tend to work out which is my weakest colour, and in this case it's raw sienna. Just put some raw sienna into it, it'll break that darkness up. Now, we don't want too much dark, but I quite like the way that that's working. Okay, so let's just quickly, I'm going to mix all this up, all my colours, and
Brave.
get rid of some of that pink. But that pink is still showing underneath. Can you see it's still? And I did that because if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have the effect. So here's my colours. I can go back and mix more clean colours if I want to. I don't necessarily want to just paint with gunge, so that's more of a green. I quite like what's going on here. I'm not painting backwards and forwards. A bit more in there. Don't want to lose my lights, especially here. Just getting rid of those edges, nice soft edges. Put a bit more in there. Quite like that. Anything I don't like, I get rid of. Right. What I'm going to do, just to show you, is I'm going to dry that off. Normally I wouldn't dry it. If I now take that off, okay, some of my bubbles are going to disappear because I haven't painted the whole thing. And you see how I get my lights back? But they are too light. Okay. So all I'm going to do is, what colour do I want? I'm going to keep them with that. And I'm just very gently going to just put some raw sienna over them. Okay. Now the other thing I wanted to show you was two ways of doing the bubbles. So we can paint bubbles positively. So I've got this mix on my plate. And I'm going to do a big bubble here. So I'm going to paint it in positively. Control the wetness. Nice bubble. And that's darker. I'm going to lift from this side. Okay. And then I'm going to get a muddy version. A bit like painting stones. And I then got a bubble. And that, when it's in water, it will look right. The other way, that needs water on it. The other way is, you see how I've got some bubbles where I've taken off the masking fluid. I'm going to dark colour on one side. I'm going to bring it across and I'm going to soften it. So all I'm doing is making, I hope, the bubble look a bit more 3D. Because those are just looking a bit stark. They're looking like I've got a white pen and just stuck them on. And I'll go and do that one. So we're just trying to make them stand out from the background. And again, very often, if you're just patient enough to allow that paint to soak into the paper, you will then get a harder, darker edge, and it will start to look more real, because the paint won't bleed into the surrounds. And that is basically everything to finish the hippos. You see the difference it's making just by putting some of those darker edges. So I'm just playing. Don't have to make them all round. Just playing. So it's all about those lights and darks.